Okay, great. Thanks for everyone for coming. Looks like we had people drop out, but and thank you guys for presenting it again today. This is always a great event. You guys at TT have always been a great host to the Chicago Computation Group, and so, all right, thanks, guys.
All right, thanks. Today we have a long presentation, so we're gonna go fairly fast. But feel free to ask any questions along the way, and then we can also afterwards dig into any topics that we want to. But so today I'm going to talk about some advanced BIM workflows, some of the tools that we created at the Core Studio at Thornton Tomasetti, as well as some of the projects that came out of our hackathon last year, which are pretty interesting. So Thornton Tomasetti, we're a large office, have quite a bit of 36 offices. Maybe there's one more now. We just opened an office in Copenhagen. So we have a fairly wide reach. I'm not going to go into this too much, but we do a lot of things in and around engineering. We have a few architects in the office, mostly working in facades or forensics type work, and also sustainability, and in Core Studio actually. So Core Studio is a corporate entity at Thornton Tomasetti. We're, 19 folks plus 2 in our Konstru software platform, which I'll talk about. The majority of us are engineers and architects who just happen to be pretty heavily into computation, as well as probably 8 of the people here are full-on programmers, pretty hardcore programmers. The order is in when we joined the group. So myself and Jonathan Schumacher actually started the group in 2010. Slowly we built the group around building, not just like, the coolest thing around, but sort of the low-hanging fruit type tools that the whole office can get value out of. And we've been able to demonstrate sort of the efficiencies that are built upon some of the tools that we've built to the office, sort of leaders, and we're growing every day. So it's nice to see the progress of some of the tools that we built, which will show. So we're considered one of these incubators, I guess, and but really, like I said, it started out as building small apps in the office. Doing some R&D along the way, all in hopes of improving projects and productivity. So these are the sort of trajectories that we work on. Automation, which is, I feel like, a lot of the tools that we build, plugins that, for Grasshopper, for Revit, Dynamo tools, analysis tools, CSI analysis set of tools. As well as interoperability, and I'll talk about that today. Konstru is a startup, as I mentioned. TTX is where it started, I'm going to talk about a little more. Visualization, I think, is a significant weakness in our industry, particularly for engineers. We're sort of a slave of the platform that we're working on, but it doesn't always give us everything that we need in terms of understanding our design as it relates to structural design, as it relates to the architecture. So we built quite a few tools just on data visualization. People, the funny thing about building new tools is that it takes people a little bit of time, sometimes a lot of time, to adjust to the new workflow. So if someone's used to doing something for the last 10 years, it's hard to sort of, nudge them into a new work process. So it's sort of our everyday sort of task is to convince some of those folks that in a very nice way, what they've been doing in the last 10 years could be done better, right? So anyway, that's a real issue that we have in our industry as a whole. Structures AI is we started getting into machine learning and artificial intelligence in 2015. I never heard about it until one of our guys, Dan Reynolds, in the group told me about it, and I said to myself, that makes a lot of sense in our industry, because so much of what we do is not only repetitive, but also there's a certain intelligence and sort of learned experience that we sort of know the answer to a problem without actually doing the problem, without actually doing sort of the back of the envelope type thing. And that's basically what artificial intelligence is taking known solutions and building an algorithm around it. And if we can take that knowledge from all the engineers across Thornton Tomasetti, then sooner or later, someone in the office will have done a project or solved some problem that, if we ask it correctly and if we program it correctly, that we'll get an answer without doing any calculations. So that's sort of the idea, and we're going to show some of that. So some of the types of projects that Core Studio specifically gets involved in are some of these specialty projects, ones that require a lot of computation, analysis, geometry. And so we've done these kinetic sculptures with the artist Ruben Margolin, who I cold called one day. I saw it on some of his videos on YouTube, and I said, this guy, I got to talk to this guy, I need this guy. So he does these wave sculptures, does all the math by hand. So the first one we worked on was the one on the right, which is a permanent exhibit at the Boston Museum of Science called Riverloom. This was the other one that we worked on. I think it's called Contours. It's for a private client in New York City. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about project I worked on, the Cornell Tech project, and of course we also worked on Google project at VAB. So, automating process, I mentioned, we have 70 plus, maybe 80 plus tools now in Revit. It's our most widely used set of suite of tools in the office. They range from just simple geometric type of thing, setting up sheets, to data visualization and some automation, which I'll get to. Carbon calculator. Anyway, so there's a lot of stuff in there that we use. So this is data visualization. We built it's our in-house web viewer for Revit models. And so basically it starts in Revit. We have a little Mirar exporter. You can see the upper left, this Mirar button there. And you can view the model in any one of these web browsers. And it's specific. We built for large models. We work on large projects. The last thing you want to have is a model that is very slow, so it defeats the purpose. The nice thing about this, having a web viewer, is that you can share this model with your client without them having Revit, let's say, right? All the data attributes are built in. You can click on an element, you can see what's there, exactly what you have from Revit. We're actually starting to build out a tool that will be able to not only have BIM attributes, but analysis attributes as well. So, and we'll have to have visualizations with that, so we can see axial forces, and moment diagrams, and shear diagrams, and all those things, all ported just through the web viewer. We're going to start using that for internal use for, let's say, QA/QC type of work. So it's sort of packaging the whole analysis model with the viewer. So this, believe it or not, was built. The beginnings of this started at a hackathon, and I'm not going to go through that, but it was actually in 2014. A bunch of people built a very lightweight viewer, just like this, that could export a 3D Max file, a Revit file, a Grasshopper file, and one other, I think it was a SketchUp file, into something very similar. Obviously, it wasn't as robust as this, but it started at the hackathon, and then we just built upon it. Framing QA. So it's a little bit of a lag here, apparently. There you go. So Framing QA is a tool that we built. It's still alpha right now in the office. We call it an outlier identification. Basically, it's a Revit program that does a structural analysis check of all the beams in a model. We have a bunch of structural analysis tools. We call it core.structure. It's in the cloud. So it actually pulls some algorithms from the cloud, does the analysis, and reports back the results. So we can actually do design in the cloud, but for now we're just using the QA. I'll just go through it. So we had to create these load patches for every project, it's a requirement, but we've actually made it so that it's smart, it has data attributes to it, so dead loads and live loads. that gets applied to the Revit model. This is just a test model. We have a much more robust viewer now, but this was the only video that I had shorthand. So this is doing a beam check for all the beams in the model. And the important part about this is that, it's in a very large model, if you can imagine, it's hard to find, someone just accidentally put the wrong size in, which, could have big problems later on in a model. So this is finding an overstressed element by 15%. Spotlight is, again, another sort of data visualization tool. So the problem being, as a project manager, many times, SD, DD, I kind of know what let's say the quantity takeoff should be in a building. If I'm doing a 10, 12-story building, I know that the amount of steel in the building is going to be anywhere from 12 to 14 pounds a square foot. I just kind of know it from experience and whatever, and from early analysis. And what happens many times, at the heat of a deadline, people in the group just kind of go crazy and get a little messy with their model just to get it out the door. And sooner or later, we're at 15, and then I get the call from the client saying, "You guys, what happened?" And then I have to respond. So the idea of this is we can track the model. It's basically a quantity takeoff tool that very simple to use. So it starts in Revit. We have a spotlight button there. It opens it up, and it starts to take off. At every floor level, it takes off quantities, concrete and steel, which is what we're interested in. It could take off any other sort of metric, but right now it's just doing concrete and steel. And it actually is color-coded by the type of element as well. And so it's a very good, and it gives a summary on the left. So it's a very good tool for project managers because we can also dig down into more detail. It gives, it'll spit out of every single element in the model if we need it. But the other nice thing, it's a web app as well. So, project manager can just dial in to spotlight.thorntontomasetti.com and see what's going on with the project, sort of high level. And actually, we've talked about this with some certain clients, and clients are really interested. Like, they want to see what's going on in the model. So, it's relatively new, but we're starting to see a lot of people will start to use it in different projects. This one is a sort of a different shift. This was built, we have a tool called FIM Portal, which was started out as an R&D project. FIM stands for Forensic Information Modeling. And it started out with, do you guys remember the I-35 bridge in Minnesota that collapsed a while back, right? 5 or 6 years ago? We were the engineers to do the investigation for that project. And at the time, the only way that we had to store data, let's say shop drawings, photographs, reports, was through a Revit model, which was really heavy. So so we would have a way to view it on certain elements of that bridge structure, and then tag, let's say PDFs or JPEGs or whatever to that element. So we created a more lightweight version that is, more robust, extendable to any kind of data that we can imagine. And this is actually an actual project in New York City. It's a facade investigation for a project on Madison Avenue. So we're using the 3D model as a sort of navigation viewer, sort of like Google Maps in a way. And then we're tagging certain elements that, we're expected to have issues. And then in this case, you can see it showing up as orange. We can zoom in into that very specific element. And then all the data that we want, it could be anything, this happens to be a picture, is focused on that element. So it's very great for clients. Clients can see this. We're actually working with a very large real estate company. They're interested in using a similar viewer for selling real estate. Because right now it's just kind of like property, listed by property. But real estate people will be very interested in listing by views and what side of the building they're on and things like that. So, I see this actually as being a very valuable tool for building owners for their existing buildings. I I guarantee you, and all these buildings around Chicago or large cities, they probably have stacks and stacks and stacks of PDFs, and that's how they track their buildings, right? And also all the renovations that go on, it would be really nice to have it in one location in 3D model space. So a little bit of R&D, and we have someone here who's working on this project over here, the Curve Appeal project, which is going to be experimental 3D printed house. But it started with Branch Technology, which is a startup firm, 3D printing startup firm. We worked on the Design Miami project with Shop Architects. It's called Flotsam and Jetsam. It was they won a competition for the Design Miami exhibit last year, and we did the engineering for them in really short order. I think we had like 3 weeks to do it. And this material is plastic. It's not strong at all. It's very weak. So we've actually written at least one paper on how to analyze this type of structure, which is a little, we can talk about it for a long time. But the beauty about this project was, we had to analyze the project before we knew the exact tessellation of the matrix of the basic. It's a truss type matrix. You can see it down below, basically millions of elements. And so we had a very short time to analyze it because they had to start printing. And if you've ever seen, have you guys seen the 3D doodler thing where you actually draw in 3D space? That's the technology. Basically, it's a gigantic 3D doodler using a robot or a series. They have like 5 robots in their shop.
Or do they have a crane? Something?
They don't have a crane. They have it's a large robot with a 10-foot radius, and it's on a track. So they can do very long elements, but they're still limited to the 10-foot element. And so this is actually made in sections and pieces, and just zip tied together, actually. So there's 2 of these pavilions. You can see it, you can find it online or whatever. There's 2 of these pavilions, and it was put together in 2.5 days by a bunch of architects, mostly from Shop Architects. So the beauty of it is that in a 3D printing world, and that is like sort of the panacea of 3D printing, is that everything fits perfectly if you do it right. And even the base plates were laser jet, just everything fit. And it was taken down and reinstalled. It's actually now in the design district of Miami called Jungle Plaza, and it was not designed for hurricane. As a matter of fact, we told them that it was only designed for 15-mile-an-hour wind. Of course, we had the hurricane recently, and they were supposed to take it down. That was the deal. They never did, but it survived. So, probably 89-mile-an-hour winds. So we don't even know like the extent of, sort of how good or how extensive we can actually push the limits of this material, because we don't know how to test it. So that's sort of the challenge of that Starter project. More closer to Chicago, this is going to be an installation at the Chicago Field Museum using the same Branch Technology matrix. We're doing the engineering, but also the fabrication drawings. Ron's working on that now. Pretty hard and heavy. So a lot of late nights to finish this up for, I think, spring. This is going to be up. So there's a bunch of clouds to be done there. A lot of coordination issues. And then this one is going to be, this is called One City Bandshell. This is going to be in Nashville, Tennessee, new development there. It is it will be the largest 3D printed structure ever built. It's a permanent structure. It's about 38 feet from leg to leg. And we had to do quite a bit of engineering, form finding, topology optimization, many different studies on this. And you can see, so that darkened area is just one little piece that's going to be fitted together. They're going to have to discretize the whole thing into a lot of pieces, but you can kind of see it closely, sort of the matrix there. So this is one. The Asterisk tool is rapid design feedback that we've developed, and really this is a culmination of 5 years or so of thinking about this problem of, architects design very, rapidly, things change, and they're looking for engineers to give them feedback, quick feedback, so that can inform the next iteration, right, to improve that process. Well, many times, again, it's sort of our tools are not there, to actually respond that quickly, and then by the time we actually do respond, it's already way beyond, what that information can actually sort of tell the next generation of the architectural design. So this is something that we've developed based on two things. One was sort of automated engineering design, and the other was a sort of remote design. So we call it remote solving. The first tool on the left is a tool that we work with Element Tech Studio out in Seattle. Basically, the model on the left that they're spinning around now is the architectural model. It would talk to our model on the right. We would do the engineering in our Grasshopper definition, and then port back the results, which happens to be embodied energy in this case, on the left. And so, this was, again, something that as long as we had the data aligned with our model from the architect's model, we can do the analysis. This was sort of we called it remote solving, sort of engineering as a software in a way, if you will. This was back in 2012. And then, and then also in 2012, we had this tool, which is basically embodied energy tool. Again, that was just kind of the basis of that one up above. But it was something that we were always interested in. We have a sustainability group. They were saying, how does structures and sustainability marry? And we put our heads together. At the time, there was some minimal data out there, but basically, there's a really good, some research there, MIT research if I recall. We've always, sort of talked about, environmental systems, improving sort of the energy usage of a building. But nowadays, with very efficient buildings, the amount of embodied energy in a building, it would take 90 years potentially for the operating energy to equal that amount of energy used just in the building structure. And of the building structure, 50% of the embodied energy is in the structure and facades. Just that. So if we can improve that portion of it smartly, then we're doing a lot, significantly more than we potentially could do even improving the mechanical system, let's say.
Did you do that for steel and for concrete?
So the trick is this, and we're also part of the Carbon Leadership Forum, which is studying all these things. It's still very much research-based. There's not a lot of good data in the United States for embodied energy metrics for concrete and steel. We kind of use, on this study, we used University of Bath study out in the UK. Germany has very good data, but again, it's for their specific countries and how they're sourcing the products. So one of the first things that those types of people have to do in the Carbon Leadership Forum is figure out US-based, sort of metrics for concrete and steel. Then what we can do is, which is again based, what I'm going to talk about is the Asterisk tool, is we can start to study what is the best embodied, in terms of embodied energy building. Is it steel columns and wood floors and concrete core, which actually I think it is, but it'll prove out to when we do the tool. Right now, our Asterisk tool just does steel, but you'll see probably in a couple of months we'll have concrete as well. So you can do that comparison. You can say, okay, I want to check a steel building and I want to check a concrete building. How does that compare both in cost and in volume? That's sort of the idea. And then this was at the same time we started to get into an issue of, which is why we switched. Some of these analyses take a long time to run in Grasshopper. It's just not that fast. We started to get into machine learning. And what you see on the right is a graph that we did a study for this was a Greenspace tool I presented at the 2015 what's it called, AIA conference in Atlanta. Basically what I was looking at was, if I had let's take a building and I run both structural metrics, daylighting, and energy usage, using the same, let's say, inputs, let's say the building massing, percentage of glazing, the type of glazing, floor heights, column spacing, all these things, and put them and try to, vary the combination of all those inputs, it would take 95 years to do the calculation in Grasshopper. So we ran 5,000, you can see on the right, used machine learning, and we were able to do it in 15 minutes. So that was when we started to see the power of machine learning, and we actually presented that paper at a conference. So that's when we decided to build this tool. Basically, it's a web app that gives you structural feedback very quickly. It calculates cost per square foot, embodied energy, and total weight of the building. Things that you can change is you can obviously change the massing, but you can also change the core size. You can change the column grid. You can change the program. The column program affects weight and also affects vibration criteria and the type of facade. Again, like I mentioned, we're going to change materials. We're also going to include some facade metrics as well, actual performance facade metrics. So I'm going to walk you through this. This is very early in this development. It starts in the native Rhino space. You choose the massing, basically a VREP. You pick the core dimensions. It very quickly does a structural analysis based on those inputs, including foundation design for piles in this case. Really, really fast. You can do multiple massings. It saves the data for comparisons later on, and I'll show you that pretty quickly. So this is just doing another massing. You can change the loading or the use. You can change column spacing, which is actually, column spacing, by the way, affects, is probably the biggest, factor that affects the weight of a structure is actually column spacing. And then it gets ported into our Design Explorer interface, and then you can start to compare those options together. So this is something that we think that designers and developers would be interested in. And then of course we have, if you do choose an option, you can start to see the data visualization quite well in our web viewer. And you can bake it and actually start using it for sections. It's doing, for column design, it's doing regular structural analysis, code-based analysis. For the floors, it's using machine learning. So we have a whole set of machine learning data particularly for floor design, that it just picks certain member sizes for the floor design. So it's very fast. It's actually that fast. So if anyone's, and this just shows the different variation of data visualization that we can check out. So we're going to include eventually concrete and wood design for this. So anybody can, sort of do a very quick design and see how the structure's performance is. And then if anyone's interested in testing this, let us know. We're in sort of the feedback stage of this tool. It's an external tool. It's really not for structural engineers. It's really for designers. So Ben, who is our director of applications, is really good with Unity. He's playing with this, the augmented reality, which I think is significantly more valuable than virtual reality in building and construction. And so that little caterpillar that his son has is sort of augmented by this BD8 model there. And then real life, so this is in our office. This is a Thomas Heatherwick vessel piece instantiated in our sort of our lobby space there, town hall space. But I see significant value in this, for construction sites, for even design, just understanding scale of projects. So any BIM model could have been put into this space. And we're also going to test it for a project that I'm working on at Pratt to actually see the as-built versus the models, do comparisons. And then I'll talk about Konstru. I mentioned Konstru is a software that we developed in Core Studio. I'm still working on it. Really, it's a data exchange platform. And these are the current tools that it works with. Excel, ETAS, structural analysis tool, SAP 2000 structural analysis, Rhino, Revit, Tekla, which is a fabrication software, and then RAM, which is a floor design software. The idea being that many people, let's say, design their floors all in RAM, and a lot of times their lateral system in SAP. And how do you merge that information without doing it manually? So what the Konstru database does is it takes all the pertinent information of SAP, puts it into a database, and then let's say you're in Revit, you can pull it into your model. So member sizes, geometry, data, any kind of other data attributes that we have in there. And then if you're in the same model, let's say Revit, you can then pull in information from RAM for the floor design. And so it basically gets rid of drafting, manual drafting anyway. So that's the power of it. It's actually very, in my opinion, very powerful. There's nothing else like it in the industry. It's a similar thing. It's just it takes time for engineers to change their workflow, from a very manual process to an automated process. Because automation could be a little bit daunting, when things happen and you don't exactly know what happened. But if you do it enough times, you start to trust it. And I'm not going to get too much into this, but this is the evolution of the tool. Myself and Jonathan conceived of the product in 2010-ish, really, having tested a bunch of one-way workflows. And, we even knew that it was going to be in the cloud, which I had no idea what the cloud was. It was sounding cool at the time. Web-based, we had no web experience at the time. We knew that it was a better work-sharing collaboration platform than a desktop, because then you can share with someone else working on the project. So anyway, fast forward, a bunch of years, and Konstru is, web-based, cloud-based structural analysis tool. So this is sort of how it works. This is the same model, all different platforms. And this is the viewer. So I was the engineer for the West 57th Street project by Big. And this demonstration just shows an analysis. So the other thing it does, it stores all of the versions of a certain push of the database. So you can compare two models side by side. And in this case, it's doing a comparison from a previous model. You can see it's like another version of it. And then it's just doing a diff. We call it diff. It's doing a difference between one model versus the other and reporting that back. And we're actually going to do this for architectural models coming up pretty soon. We actually have it built out, but we haven't tested it on a lot of use cases. So you'll be able to see all the changes that were made from the previous version. There's we see building information models is really just a database, and as long as you just compare two databases together and have a visualization engine, you can actually see a lot of information you can't see, just pushing around Revit files all the time. This is new. So, have you guys ever heard of Flux? Flux.io? So Flux is a startup that came out of Google X in, 4 or 5 years ago, and we actually were one of their early testers. Started out as Vanavar, and then they became Genie, and then they became Flux. They've had $30 to $40 million of funding. They were actually our only real competitor to Konstru, and really, they didn't do structural information. They just did they pushed through kind of primitive information, geometry. It's better than that, obviously, but so we decided in the last 2 weeks, because they're actually they're shutting down that tool. They announced that 2 weeks ago, to build a very similar tool. So this was actually released today, actually. So you can actually test this today. So this is moving, so very simple geometry from Rhino to Revit. And it's be very good for like reference reference geometry, and so it's pretty minimal, sort of workflow in Grasshopper. And you'll see how this thing works. It's basically defining the geometries, the level of information that we want to push over.
Are you doing the Grasshopper stuff on a web page also, or is that something?
No, that's on the desktop. That's a different interface, by the way. We actually released a tool called Platypus that would actually just use the web interface, but that's a different story. Yeah. So it's writing to the database. The Konstru database has a viewer, so you can see what you actually just pushed through, right? You can see it like the surface didn't take all of the nervous geometry, but it took the majority of it. And then this is just pushing it into Revit. So there, it's in Revit, right? So it's quite powerful if you're working mostly in Rhino, which most architects do quite a bit, but you want to port that information over to Revit. It's pretty powerful. It doesn't do the exchange that the other structural tools do, which it's a two-way exchange, but even as a one-way exchange, it's pretty powerful. So this is as of today. So so BIM, as I mentioned, there's a lot of stuff that goes into BIM, and we do have a lot of tools that help us through that process.
Yeah, so we're going to speak a little bit about Core Studio and the projects that we get involved in. I represent Core Studio here in Chicago. I work with other offices with TT, LA, Los Angeles, New York. And one of the things that Core Studio does a lot is how do we collect information from all these offices and feed it back to the group so we can understand our tools better. So without understanding the tools that we're creating, then we're not providing a good platform for our engineers and people outside to work in their own environments, right? So we do a lot of analytics as well on our tools, so we actually understand what the tools are about, who's using it, and what's going on. So I think that's a very key aspect of if you're building tools, if you're getting into this kind of work, it's like, how do you track those informations? How do you get people outside of your firm, or if you have other firms or other groups, how do you talk to them? How do you interact with those other firms, other practices to get the best out of it? So I tend to work a lot with facades, structure, renewal, specialty projects with Rob in New York, and some other massive projects too. I'm part of the research and development, so I do a lot of photogrammetry, trauma applied. So it's a bunch of little things that Core Studio gets involved besides building massive tools and doing all that. So I'll be speaking about some of the projects. I guess this is the Hudson Yard project that we worked on New York City.
I'll go through this quickly. So Anthony put the picture of Hudson Yards in our presentation, but I figured we had to put it in there. I'm going to go through this quickly. If anyone's in New York, I would say that's a project to go see. The Hudson Yards project. It is ridiculous amount of development on a for a relatively small area, and in particular, the Shed project designed by Gilles Confidio and the Rockwell Group, as well as the Vessel designed by Tom Seven. So we were the engineers for both of those, and we had to sort of be very quiet. There's like NDAs about it for a very long time. We could finally talk about it because it's built. You just go there and see it. So the Shed is a movable project, a movable building. It's to give you a sense of scale, it's about 120 cubed feet. It's 120 feet high, 120 feet long, 120 feet wide. It's huge. And it's a movable building, so it sort of tucks into this tower. It's called Tower D. I think it's called something else now. But most of the time, and then when there's an event, a large-scale event, it can be moved out, rolled out, and I think it takes like 10 minutes, or I don't know, I forget the time. Not a long time. And then there's these huge doors on the north. So north is into the page, south is out of the page, and east is to the right. Huge doors that can be opened or closed depending on the weather, and actually be fully conditioned as well in the extended deployed position. So it's a very complicated building. It's probably another year and a half or something before it actually gets conditioned, but the structure is up now. This is just a short video showing how it was conceived and how it's supposed to work later on. We were also the engineers for the whole platform of Hudson Yards, and also Tower A. And you know, it's a gigantic project. I mean, say 100,000 tons of steel. We're built into these projects, which is about $500 million worth of work. And we actually do the fabrication engineering for it too as well. So multiple design iterations of this project went into place. We did the facade engineering as well with the ETFE pillows, as well as glass engineering. So, you know, a very complex project, you know, when you get into the details, but in terms of its functionality, it's actually quite simple in a way. So it's a fixed building with large-scale open spaces to be used for like museum-type spaces and large events, and then this sort of lightweight sculptural piece that moves in and out. We did the digital project modeling for this. You know, two of our folks in the group were former Gary Technologies people, so modeling for this type of work is relatively straightforward for us. The fabricator was ridiculously good, a fabricator in Italy. We'll show a little bit of that. And they actually, I mean, considering the complexity of you know, like US contractors wouldn't even touch this thing. So luckily that we had, you know, good connections with these steel fabricators in Italy. But so again, these are some of the largest ETFE pillows in the world, and you can see the scale of it. It's just, you don't understand the scale until you actually get close to it, and then hopefully the pictures will show some of that. But it is just a huge, huge project. So again, I mentioned the facade engineering part. This was sort of early design pieces. It's actually been rationalized a little bit. It's significantly smaller than those pieces. And I'm not going to go too much into these things. So this is a fairly recent photo of the project. And again, the detailing was, we also did the kinetic engineering for the project as well. And you can see, so Eli standing there, he's 6'4", you know, he's a very tall guy. These bogies, these wheels are gigantic, they're way taller than me. So, very complex project, a lot of detailing, a lot of communication with the architect as well as the fabricators. So this was just the mock-up piece. We actually did scanning for the mock-up to actually compare the three competitors and see how well they did from the mock-up versus the actual. They were compensated for the work, and then we did a point cloud comparison versus from the analytical to the actual. That was just some fabrication photos. Again, like in the U.S., like doing this plate folded warp plates would be astronomically expensive, and then for whatever reason, maybe it's just Italy is the fabricators are just used to these complex shapes, you know.
Did they fabricate that in Italy and bring it to here?
Yeah, it was still less expensive, so you can imagine.
Yeah, I believe the fabricator is close to the shipyard, or they just ship it.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is a fairly recent photo. You can see the ETFE sort of being installed there. You can see that these members are gigantic, and the scale of it is just tremendous. So I only worked on the project early design. This is, I think, one of the first moves of the project. When I first sort of moved that one day, it was a big event. Let's just say that. When I first moved. Siami is the construction manager, and JB&B is the mechanical engineer. Of course, a lot of subcontractors for this work. So it's going pretty well. So the other project right next door, you can see the shed to the left there. Right next door is the Heatherwick project, you know, it's I would say equally impressive and complex. but also quite different in terms of what it does and what it is. It's a gigantic sculpture, this project. And I showed you the little dog bone, we call it the dog bone steel piece, and you can see some of it here. So the hard part about this project was early in the design was rationalizing, actually doing the engineering for this. So we had to do quite robust shell analysis for the steel pieces, figure out how it was going to get built, so we group the elements to make things a little bit easier. And you can see the scale of the project pieces there. It's a very large project. So as we call it, the dog bone there. Again, this was the same fabricator, actually, really. And even the structural analysis is very difficult to do. We use the workflow using Inventor to get the surfaces modeled. I'll go through this pretty quickly. This is just a mock-up in their, or they actually dry fit the pieces in their shop. It's just the element. And then this is a fairly recent photo of the project. It's about 150 feet tall, I believe. So definitely worth checking out next time you're here in New York City.
I think that for the most part of those buildings or projects that we worked, first we started doing everything in Rhino and Grasshopper, and doing for the shed, especially the image that you have for the presentation. We did a bunch of iterations of the structure for the facade, and we were able to just do it with Grasshopper straight from sketches from the engineer and the architect as well. For the dog bone analysis, it was a little bit more intense. They had I think the script had a lock, so you couldn't go dig into it too much. But yeah, we were able to actually navigate that. So this project that I worked with the LA office is a stadium that we designed both the facade and the roof engineering, and we're doing the bowl as well analysis. And I worked on the part where the bowl with LA, and for the most part, the bowl has a clash routine every 2 months, or at least 1 month every month. So every month we get together, we go over the clash detections, and we analyze what are things that need to be taken care of. So we built an automation tool using Dynamo to read the clash detection from Navis. So Navis, you can export an Excel sheet and get all the information you need from both models to do something with it. So instead of just doing it manually, why not just use technology to automate some of these things that you can do. So we obviously did the workflow for this was actually to separate MEP, fire suppression, and plumbing and all those into basic elements or clash detection models, and then extract that information individually so we can parse through that information. So you don't want to be dumping, 400 openings, and that don't make any sense. So you want to make sure that you take, let's say, the largest models, the HVAC, and make sure that you get the right elements out there and the clash detection for that element, and address those issues first, and then go from there to the smallest ones that need to be addressed. So for that, we built a tool in Dynamo to automate this, and it was really important to address the openings for all the walls on the perimeter as well from floors. And we built 2 basic families in Revit to do the placement host by element or family. So you can host them by floors or by walls. So it's a pretty standard family. The only thing that we did was extract information and then build a pretty simple, I would say, Dynamo tool that addressed this information. So in this case, we built it. I sent that plug-in to the LA office. I told them what to do, how to do it, and we went through it half a day, and then they were able to run it. So a lot of the things that we do with Core Studio is how can you build workflows that are easy enough for other people to use. You don't want to be building massive computational things that only you can understand, not somebody else, because then people will never touch that platform again. So you want to make sure that they can understand, okay, this goes from here to here, does this. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
So basically, just go back to that image. So basically what the tool does is it does the clash detection and uses the output of the clash detection as to drive the opening on. So in other words, basically, you don't have to do it 2 times or 3 times or 4 times. Use the actual clash detection as of course that doesn't, you have to still do coordination with even folks, but that's a better first pass than us taking one of their models and manually looking at every single pipe penetration.
Yeah.
Use a Navisworks file, run it, and then put the openings in.
It's just easier, if you open an MEP model, it's huge. You don't want to look at it. It's making sense. So Navis is amazing. It's lightweight, so you can do that pretty fast. And it just took a couple of days to build all this information. They were able to run this through it.
So this is something I'm talking about really quickly. This is, we didn't have fabrication in our last presentation. This one I thought I would throw this in here. So we did the fabrication modeling for this project in New York City, in Vanderbilt. And we were actually not the structural engineer, we were the engineer, the fabrication engineer. And we're a huge proponent of doing this type of work, particularly in steel building. We start the fabrication engineering basically in DD, and then by the time we can do mill orders, sort of towards the end of DD or early CDs, and then by the time they hit the CD button, 100% CDs, we're ready actually to do all the engineering. So this project, from the data from the client, the project is going to be a minimum of 7 months early, and at 1.6 million square feet, that's a lot of rentable space and the money that they can save by doing this type of workflow. And this is the sort of process that we used, and we've built quite a bit of automation tools in Tekla. So this is a Tekla. This happens to be Tower A at Hudson Yards. Basically, we created a tool that will automate, connections in a Tekla model. And so there's actually only one other company I think that has this. They're a startup. It's called Connect or something. It's not as good as our tool. So basically, it instantiated all of the steel connections using the tool in like 10 minutes, and that would normally take someone like 2 weeks to do.
So what do you mean when you say automate the connection?
Okay, so in order to put, like a shear tab in a connection, it takes someone like at least an hour to do. They have to design it, one, and then they have to do a bunch of clicks in Tekla to pull that thing into the BIM model. This does it all in one swath. So we actually, 4 years ago maybe, I sent Kenny Tam, who's one of our computer programmers, to a Tekla API class. We were like the only engineer who showed up. There was like 2 people that showed up, and because we knew that we were going to do automation in Tekla. And so, we can take the information directly from Revit, put it into Tekla using Konstru, and then it has all the design information embedded in the data attributes of Revit, and then it can automate the connection. This was worked on with our fabrication engineers. They didn't trust like the programs in some black box, so it's actually calling their spreadsheets for the design, and then talking to the Tekla API to put the member in. So this is a huge time saver. It doesn't do all the connections. It does beam to beam, beam to column, and it does moment connections, which is basically 70 to 80% of what it wants. So it's a huge time saver. It's another one of these tools that we don't need to be necessarily fabrication experts, but as long as we know how the workflow works, we can do the automation.
So, and we have a bunch of other tools in Chicago as well that people have built for Tekla. So this is another project that I'm just going to talk quickly about it. So this is a SketchUp model from an artist that reached out to us to build a museum for children up here. So, so the children need to go up there and play around. So he has done something similar in China. So the only way to communicate through him is through SketchUp. That's the only means of software that he developed. So for us, our main platform is Rhino. So how do you take this information from an external platform into Rhino for documentation for our structural engineers, right? So we built a bunch of tools that allows us to extract parameters from the SketchUp model in Rhino and assess what sizes they have in there, or what sizes he's looking for, and then we can create our own sizes according to our standards, right? We can extension that from the libraries that we have, and then bring it into Konstru for documentation in SAP as well. So I think it's a really kind of important way that these other tools, Rhino, Grasshopper, and are means to get other information in there. So don't think about like, oh, Rhino's just this tool, but it's a really versatile tool that you can just dump anything, almost anything in there, and then you can extract some information out of it. So I think it's important to have that kind of skills to use that. And then this is just the analysis model showing you different types of section profiles that we're able to assign to the SAP model. And just sending out that again to the fabrication platform where it's going to get, somebody's going to have to build the cut sheets and all that and send it out for Mirar. And then eventually for Revit for documentation. So at the end of the day, since we're working with a museum and some other architects, so that information that the artist is doing in SketchUp has to be translated into Revit for city permits. So he doesn't have any idea how to use Revit. He's not getting involved in that. We're going to do most of that work. So it's kind of interesting to find out those kinds of things. And there's a couple of tools out there that I've seen from somebody in Denver that allows you to bring a whole SketchUp model into Revit. So that's something interesting that I'm looking into, is to see how they're doing it and how we can help the artists achieve that. So at the end of the day, this involves different parties, not only the SketchUp guy, but us, the fabricator, the museum guy, and so everything. So all that information needs to come into Revit and become a BIM model. So other works that we're doing, it's a project with the SGG, and this is a massive undertake by our office. It's been long nights here with some of the folks here, and it's pretty intense. It's a dome with a bunch of hotels and offices surrounding this. I believe it's 70 meters plus dome, something like that. So we started using some of our specialty tools to analyze the dome, but there's a quite simplistic front door right down here and around here. So it's pretty kind of interesting to see what he did 50, 40 years ago to simplify drawings and complexity in 2D, and how you can take that into a 3D platform. So basically we're taking all this information in Rhino and making sure that we use the definition that I built and gave to the team to automate the analysis of the cast. So you want to make sure that you have an idea before building this, or talking to fabricators about it, how many notes you're going to have. They all have to be similar. You don't want to have dissimilar notes. So basically what you're seeing in the bands is all those green, blue ones are similar. So you should be able to know how many cast notes you're going to build. And I believe our main engineer is right now in Dubai. He's overseeing some of this information as well as like taking 2D geometry and taking it into the 3D platform and documentation in Revit. So how do you document this information, right? Both as a 3D BIM data as well as a 2D information. So for this, we were unrolling some of the surfaces to create 2D drawings out of it, without losing any of the information in terms of lengths and so all that, because that had to be documented as well in Revit. Another part of that project that we worked on was the hotel areas. They're all concrete buildings, and we did all the analysis here. So we had to document this building in terms of the rebar design, so the additional rebar that's going to be placed on the model, the sheets. So we used RAM to design the floor rebar, and what you see on the top right, I guess the right left corner, is the additional rebar information that you have to set up in RAM. So all this information somebody has to draft this in Revit. Well, a few years ago I had to draft this.
A couple years ago.
The old way of doing it is you take the information, the glue just from the analysis program. Another engineer would literally redraw it and then give it to a drafter, and the drafter would put it on the CAD drawing. That's a lot of work. Yes. Thousands of hours, I know, because I'm project manager for these projects. And you just created a tool that takes exactly what you see. It's got the right annotation, the right line weights and things, and pulls it up into Revit.
So yeah, this came out of DC office. We had a Dynamo group meet up every month, and we talk about different workflows that people are doing. And somebody came out with this, so we started brainstorming about the tool. But it all came out from exploring the outputs from that platform into a text Excel-based file, and then you can recreate that information. Right? So it only took another kind of intense family to read all these parameters, but at the end of the day, it saved tons of hours for the project managers and the team to do this, and you can iterate through the design and recreate this information.
I'm gonna fast forward. I think we're
Yeah.
on time. So, not to keep similar workflow. Dynamo, Revit, Konstru, SAP. It's SAP 2000. So this is probably in our Boston office, the big airport. Ram created the Dynamo definition to get to basically create these structural frames based on the surface geometry, which if you had to do that manually would take a long time. This is the more recent version. And so, just by having these sort of expertise, we're helping these other offices. No one needs to concentrate on clicking and, figuring out the geometry. We'll concentrate on the geometry, they can concentrate on the engineering. That's sort of the idea. This is it in the Konstru platform. And then this is a nice little project that our DC office worked on. So we have another Core Studio guy, Richard Smith, in our DC office. Very good with Grasshopper and Dynamo. Also starting to write some code now. So this is a complex facade, steel frame facade. It's using Dynamo to rationalize the geometry, and then getting that information into Revit. Nice workflow, and then using our Spotlight tool, which he was actually one of the developers for, to calculate the steel. It actually also tracks the timeline of the quantities, although this is there's not enough data to actually produce real timelines by hours. So, but eventually, it'll be months of time in this project. It's a project that Haram worked on with KPF, and we can talk about this one.
Yeah, no, this is from the Chicago office here, pretty intense schedule. So we went from this massing to a different massing within a couple of weeks. So we had to generate a Grasshopper definition that allowed us to read those changes and just update our model itself. So at the end of the day, we also use the Navis clash detection workflow to read the information, so we can zero in on the elements that we need to address, other than looking into the PDF itself.
And this is relatively new. Have anybody used Visual Arc? Yeah. So Visual Arc is a Rhino based tool, and basically what it does is it takes someone who's very good at Grasshopper can create a definition. Let's say a complex facade panel, parametric definition. Let's say length, height, width, or whatever the geometry has to be that's parametric. It basically gets kind of baked into Rhino using Visual Arc. So the nice thing about it is then that person can then save that as a native Rhino file, and then that person can then instantiate and modify the geometry that was embedded in the Grasshopper definition. So it's kind of bringing Grasshopper to the person who doesn't know Grasshopper. The nice thing about that is Rhino is a really nice tool to draw in, and I see it as a very powerful thing for the future, because again, we can now do parametric modeling in the Rhino environment and have it talk to Revit directly. So this is a project where we have it actually working for Konstru right now. This was just a very quick competition that we worked on, but I needed some visuals, and Ron worked on this. And so we were able to create this. This is Visual Arc model, and we're able to port that into Revit very quickly for visualization. So I see it as a very powerful tool for future sort of BIM modeling, because it sort of takes the power of Rhino, which is easy modeling, very accurate geometrically, which Revit isn't. Right? Revit is not very good geometrically. Very terrible. So I see it as a very, very powerful tool. So I want to get into this really quickly. So as I mentioned, we do this hackathon every year. This was our 5th version, and we do. That's right. So 2013 was our first, and it's really powerful. I think, a lot of people get together. We try to get really some of the best minds in technology from various fields, not just architecture and engineering, and put them in one room, and something comes out of it typically. So, I was the engineer for the bridge project in Manhattan on Roosevelt Island, and with my friend Freddie. And the nice thing about it, the project went well, so they gave us one floor of the building for free to use for the symposium and the hackathon. So 40,000 square feet they gave us. And I show this because this was early Core Studio stuff back in 2012. I didn't have an engineer to help me, so I had one of our architects help me out in Core Studio. All the architect wanted was like, what are the various, sort of geometric variations of a truss that we can use, and what are the metrics, what are the sizes that is what's working. And so, the funny thing is, like, after 3 or 4 years on this project, the one thing that Marion Weiss remembers is this, and it was a very simple task to do, just showing sizing, relative sizing, and its sort of metrics. So again, it just showed how sort of powerful parametric design was at the time. And it's a complicated project. There's 80-foot cantilevers on this project. We had to do very tight coordination and analysis showing the sequencing of the structure, how it was going to deflect, and how the facade would marry with that structure. Because it's all a completely glass facade. We didn't have a single question from the facade contractor after we finished that exercise, which is great. And even better was we actually measured the two green lines are sort of the tolerances, positive and minus tolerances of the truss deflections, and the gray line is our calculated, and the red line was the actual. These 80-foot cantilevers, we had a 1/4 inch differential from theoretical, which is like either super lucky or super good, one or the other. But 1/4 inch differential in any structure, particularly 80-foot dimensions, is really, really tight. So again, we might have been really lucky there. But Ram does a lot of our drone work. This was just an experimentation. Again, we had a good relationship with the client. They let us fly their drone around the project. This is more R&D, because what we were doing was doing drone work, photogrammetry, compared to the BIM model. I actually think it's a really powerful workflow. I think the best way of doing it is using a scanner, like a LiDAR scanner, because the accuracy is so much better. But this was a very good sort of test of that technology, comparing 3D point clouds. Let's see. So these are the speakers that we had. Anna was actually a Core Studio person a few years ago. She's now one of the senior developers at Iris VR. We have Frederick Schur. She's great. She's a machine learning expert. Fast Forward Labs. Ruben Margolin was the artist that was the designer of those projects, those wave projects that I worked on. Randy Deutsch here is at Illinois, and then we had, the engineering from Big, Cecile, and then the WeWork guys, Andrew and Brian Ringley. It was great lineup. So I'm going to talk about some of the projects. So this was kind of a fun project. This was Dynamo controlled by MIDI. These are, if you're not familiar with hackathons, they're basically 24-hour sprints from concept to a tool. And usually the idea is that you actually team with people that you don't know, that happen to have a skill set that maybe you don't have. And this person teamed with a couple of Core Studio folks, I think it was Richard and Penny, to build this tool that was a MIDI controller that controlled the Dynamo model. So kind of a fun project. DG Bash is a fun one too. So Leland Jobson's in Core Studio. He did build this tool. It's a sketching tool, and let's see, that works in Rhino. But it takes basically just these little scribbles, and you can actually work with it in Rhino, which is kind of nice. And then the next version of that is this. So it's sort of a sketching tool, which is kind of fun. I'm not sure exactly how it will get used, but I thought it was a really nice little project that was done again, 24 hours. You know, sort of fun. Let's see. Metashape. Metashape, I'm going to skip Metashape. It's a ridiculously complex project. It was basically using machine learning to classify or group building shapes. Really strong team. Really complicated. I mean, what they did in 24 hours is ridiculous. So they were using open city data. They were using machine learning algorithms. They had a web tool developed. So it was a really ridiculously powerful tool. Exactly what it was doing, probably not applicable right now, because we don't have that much data other than the shape of the building, but it can be. And I think that's sort of the idea, is that sooner or later there'll be enough information. This is just one way of classifying it, you know, sort of finding the centroid. But pretty cool. So, you know, one day is, what they did in one day is ridiculous. So Margaret's in Core Studio. Let's see, where's my so Margaret's in Core Studio. He's at here in Timberlake, and then Mark Sipp is like head of computation at NBJ. It's a really strong team. Let's see. Revelations is what Haram worked on, and then it was your colleague, right, at Smith Group, and then Haram and a couple of our guys from Core Studio. So Haram, do you want to go for this one?
Yeah, it's just basically a power copy for Revit that allows you to store information from that initial state into instantiates into a bunch of different levels of floors. So if you want to play the video, it just creates one entire room, and then you can duplicate this everywhere that you have a slab or a floor that you can select. So it allows you to change that element at the beginning, and it updates everything else, and allows you to also make 2D drawings.
Works
instead of
very well,
2D.
very repetitive. You know, in this case, it's a hospital.
Yeah.
It's like all the beds, you know, and the bedrooms end up being the same. So why redraw it 1,000 times, draw it once, and use basically a power copy to instantiate the rest of the building.
So again, it was just built in 24 hours. But it gets, the 24 hours is good enough for an idea to have project that idea to the jury and everybody else, and get some good feedback.
Yeah, if anyone's like, you know, even if they're relative beginners, it's, you know, actually the third place winner was people that I forget their names, but they were from Japan. They came all the way from Japan to attend the hackathon, and actually from a big company called Shimizu. And one of the folks actually had to learn English to actually come over here. But you know, they just wanted to see what it was all about, and they were actually the third place because part of the competition is not necessarily the tool that you build, but what you learned over the couple of days. So you know, they had very little, and they created a nice little tool. Fire calls them an energy tool. So they were actually third place winners. This might have been second place, I forget.
Second place.
Yeah. Let's keep going, right?
Yep.
It's a long video.
So right now it's just copying the whole thing, but instead of doing the bed in 3D, it just creates a 2D. You get a feed in something, so you don't have to imply you can see this.
So the duck people were the winners. These guys, 4 people here. I met James at our previous hackathon. They were creating a Core Studio-like group at AEI, they're an MEP firm. And this was really nice. So this was, they basically, based on a certain layout of the floor, are able to optimize a duct layout for that space. And then bring that information into Revit. So, to be honest, I didn't completely understand the left diagram. I'm not an MEP engineer, but the video looks pretty good. So I'm pretty sure what they're doing here is just laying out the the actual vents in space based on this massing and identifying rooms versus hallways, because I think most of the distribution ends up being in the hallway. So let it play out. So that's showing the sort of locations of the boxes. So the next slide. And then it's running through, all these are different iterations of duct layout and sizing as well. So I think it's a very quick way to see options for duct layout. Distribution. So this was the winner largely because it was something that could be used, the next day, which was kind of nuts. So like again, the power of a hackathon is that the guys from AEI were not, necessarily Revit experts, but the guy from Imagine It was, and so they were able to use that person's expertise to to sort of streamline the Revit interface really quickly, and they could use their engineering skills to help do this project. So anyway, so that's sort of the hackathon in a nutshell, and we feel like they're invaluable in terms of knowledge exchange for us. I wouldn't say the majority of our tools, but a lot of our tools came from just ideas from the hackathon, and it's because again, if you work with the same people every day, there's a limitation of knowledge in a certain amount of people, as opposed to we have I think like 90 people come to this hackathon, so that's a lot of people power, brain power in sitting in one room. So anyway, any questions? So all these tools, the majority of the hackathon projects are open source. So I think on our website, board.tomasetti.com, we have links to them. We have a summary of the events too, but yeah, so it's a very fun time. It's a lot of work, a ton of work to put these together. So people have said, why don't you have in Chicago or whatever. It's like, we hire full-time staff to do it. It was basically, we probably spend just on costs alone, direct costs, $20,000 to $30,000, and that's not including labor for people. So it's a lot of money, but we still think it's valuable, and it's exciting. It's exciting those 2 or 3 days, and we actually have a bunch of workshops too. So Dynamo workshops, Grasshopper workshops, Ladybug, Honeybee, Konstru. We had Kangaroo too, as well as two of those guys.
We got a Autodesk Forge.
Oh yeah, the Forge guys came. So really good workshops, and we're going to actually add to that. So last year they were completely packed, and we had to tell people that's it. We only have a limitation of space, so we're going to do more next year. We're going to do it probably at so we did at our office. So instead of our office, we're going to do it at the university, obviously for classroom. So nearby.
That's a good point to say, that TT in general is supportive of that, right? That's a huge investment on the part of TT and others.
It is. Actually, there was an article yesterday, I think, about in building design and construction about R&D at Thornton Tomasetti, and a lot of this is R&D. You know, the Asterisk tool that you saw, I mean, that's not something that we're going to use every day as an engineer, you know, if at all. It's really for feedback that we've sort of learned from our clients and what they're interested in, which is, you know, they're designing buildings on the fly, they want information, rapid feedback, you know, and not necessarily to engage a whole structural engineering team to do that. So what if we offered that bit of knowledge in an app, you know, and then you can iterate through the design. And then when it's time to actually start the project, then it'll be informed at least, and you know, we can sort of improve upon the design after it starts, but at least have a very good idea of that it's starting in a good place for design. Yeah, like I said, our group is completely corporate, so you know, over $1 million, well over $1 million is spent on Core Studio and R&D related work, but we've been able to demonstrate that the tools that we've built, there's basically a return on investment of at least 5 on that. So, you know, that's significant. And if you can, and then along the way we've had to demonstrate that, you know, really in a lot of clarity, because you know, someone sitting in an office is not necessarily seeing the day-to-day, but as Saram mentioned, I think before, we track every single click. So every click that someone makes at one of our tools, we track it. So we track the person, we track the office, we track the tool. And so, you know, there's been a steady rise in our tool usage, and not linearly, exponentially. And so if you take that many clicks, we know that it's saving, you know, a half an hour or something. It starts to add up significantly. And it's not going to be necessarily, that's one thing you can't promise, is it's not necessarily directly related to productivity. So if you're going to save 10 hours, that means 10 hours more in the bottom line. It just means that 10 hours gets spent doing some more important things, hopefully. So still a process. I mean, we, like I mentioned, our biggest issue is just, there's still a lot of people who don't use, you know, all of the tools now, and we're off to that point where we have so many tools it's hard to find. So that's reality, and although we've documented things really well, it's still, if you're not willing to do a lot of searching, sometimes you can't find it. So we're still working on quite a few tools that are not just, I would say, you know, developed by people just commenting on our other stuff. It's not just, in the past it was more like we had an idea, we would develop a tool and then test it. But, you know, sooner or later, again, we're only 19 people, we don't have all the ideas out there that are possible. So we're actually sort of making a concerted effort to, you know, get around the offices, like even like today, to speak with people and like sort of, you know, what would make your day happier, you know, as opposed to what makes you really, you know, upset. So we put a positive spin on it. What would make your day happier, you know, and usually someone's going to have some idea, you know, like something that they do all the time, something very repetitive or whatever that we can potentially automate. So that's sort of our philosophy. Anything else? All right, so help yourself to drinks, and if you have any questions, you know, just let us know.
Great. Thanks, Roger.